Good evening, I'm Andrew Cheng.
And I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Tonight, first vaccine doses in Nova Scotia for those over 80 and living at home.
Now that she's getting this, it's a big relief.
Plus, the urgent call for action on behalf of older Ontarians.
Parliament votes to accuse China of genocide.
The evidence is so overwhelming that we no longer can turn a blind eye.
Why the government abstained.
We had over 1 million calls to our call center.
Checking the boxes on what may be a complicated tax season.
And perseverance just keeps on giving.
Tracking maneuver has started.
New video shows the moment of contact. This is The National.
After weeks of anxiety and frustration, Canada's delayed vaccination rollout might finally be set to accelerate.
The government says it expects a record weekly number of doses from its big pharma partners. Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna will deliver a combined 640,000 doses. That's part of the 4 million due by March 31st. But now that doses are arriving in such numbers, are provinces ready to get them to you?
Each will take its own approach, make different rates of progress. For its part, today Nova Scotia launched a test project for mass vaccination. It is starting with vulnerable seniors and hopes to scale up quickly. Cale Hounsell got an up-close look.
I don't get out of here that easy.
This is how 83-year-old Elvina Poole has been keeping herself busy and active for the past year, walking the halls of her apartment building. She loves socializing, but stays in because she knows she's vulnerable to COVID-19.
I don't go into restaurants. I miss all that stuff that I used to do.
She says getting vaccinated is the first step toward a return to normalcy.
Just looking forward to it, because I haven't been out of this apartment long time.
Today, she was among the first in line to be immunized in Nova Scotia's first community clinic. Welcome news for her son, who has been trying to balance taking his mom for walks with keeping her safely inside.
It's been a huge stress on me. For the last year, been a very huge stress. Now that she's getting this, it's a big relief.
Today's clinic is for people over 80 who don't live in long-term care homes, a prototype for which 500 people have been randomly selected by their postal codes. Researchers are here too, conducting interviews to determine what works and what doesn't.
So clinics could change, as we learned from this one, but the hope is that we will be moving everything that we've learned here to the rest of the clinics as they stand up across the province.
There are 48,000 Nova Scotians over the age of 80. They'll all be invited to attend clinics by next month.
I'm excited. Really. It was a Christmas gift that didn't have to be wrapped.
For this family, there is no vaccine hesitancy, only appreciation. But Poole says she would have given up her shot for someone else.
Because people are a lot worse off than I am. As you can see, I'm pretty fit.
She already has her appointment for her next dose. That will give both her and her family even more peace of mind.
I'm right behind you, don't worry, I'm right behind you.
And so Kayla joins us now from the IWK Health Centre in Halifax. Kayla, what is the next step?
Well, Adrienne, as we heard, Elvina Poole already has her appointment for that next dose. And Dr. Robert Strang, the province's chief medical officer of health, says he hopes all Nova Scotians over the age of 80 will have that second dose by early to mid-April. Then the province will start moving that age bracket down by 5 years at a time.
Okay, so the first vaccination clinics, it seems, are beginning in First Nations communities. What can you tell us about how that will work?
That's right. The first will be on the Millbrook First Nation. That's on Wednesday. And the province really is giving First Nations communities a lot of control over how they choose to administer this vaccine. They are doing things a little bit differently. So, for example, they are starting at age 55 and older instead of 80. And they say that's because they really want to focus on their elders and knowledge keepers to ensure that they protect their language and culture, Adrienne.
All right. Kayla, thanks for this.
You're welcome.
Okay, and also in Nova Scotia, the province's chief medical health officer, Dr. Robert Strang, good enough to make some time for us. Hello, doctor. Can you tell us, what is your initial sense or your intel from the ground on how today went, in the sense of what worked and maybe what didn't work?
Yeah, we checked in with the folks running the clinic at the WK. They said that things went really well. We've got researchers who are, we're surveying all the people who came through, got immunized, getting their sense of even from the registration to parking to clinic flow, all those things. And we'll put all that together at the end of the 4 days of the clinic and help that to make the future clinics better. Because are you already getting a sense of what the stumbling blocks might be? Because, other provinces are going to be watching how your province does as well. So maybe particularly for this age group, things that you think they ought to be mindful of or take into account? So I think some of the biggest thing is identifying people. So we used our MSI, our health card database, identify everybody by age group. They got letters for this clinic of invitation. Future clinics, it won't be you won't need to be an invitation, but certainly a letter will go out telling people they can now register. They can have an online or a phone line option for this age group, especially. You can't rely on online. And even taking the details around parking, make sure we had extra accessible parking. People could park closely by the IWK. It's a busy hospital, but those things can make big differences about whether people are actually comfortable coming or not. Okay, good to hear from you on this, Dr. Strang, on day one. Thanks so much. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Now, Ontario's vaccine rollout won't just look different from those in other provinces. It could look different in each of its own 34 public health units.
The people most closely to their communities, the public health units, are making the decisions on what is the fastest and easiest and most equitable way to ensure that people get the vaccines they need.
So the province says vaccines will be distributed to local health units based on population. They will have to follow the province's requirement to vaccinate priority populations first, but details on how and when to vaccinate those groups will be up to local officials.
And some welcome vaccine news from Ottawa today. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine could be just days away from Health Canada approval. Today, Health Canada's chief medical advisor said all the necessary scientific information has been received, and now it simply needs to do its final due diligence on issues like labeling and other product information. Now, if it is approved, it'll be in part because the clinical trial data was convincing. But take a look around the world where the vaccine's already being given on a wider scale. And there's data showing how effective it might be after even just one dose. Vicodopia looks at that promising news tonight.
I don't like needles.
With a population about the size of Alberta's, Scotland has managed to give 1 out of every 5 people at least one vaccine shot, and it's seeing promising results with just that single dose. 4 weeks after a shot, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine was 85% effective at preventing hospitalizations. For the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, it's even higher at 94%, and for those over 80 years old, it was 81% for both vaccines.
We're absolutely delighted, and delighted on several fronts.
The lead researcher says holding off on the second dose has been worth the trade-off.
So trying to prioritize rollout of the vaccine and getting the first dose into as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, seems a sensible way forward.
Israel is also reportedly seeing similar protection. Just one shot was 85% effective at preventing COVID-19 symptoms in hospital staff. Quebec has already adopted the single-dose strategy amid some controversy. Even high-risk people like residents of this long-term care home got just one shot. Today, 23 of them still tested positive, but officials say what matters is the worst off have just mild symptoms.
We have cases, we have an outbreak in this long-term care. The patients are not sick, so very little symptoms, no transfers to hospital care.
There's now enough real-world evidence for the rest of Canada to rethink its vaccination plans, according to one of Quebec's top health officials.
You will certainly reduce the number of hospitalizations and deaths by deferring the second dose and administering the first dose to as many people as possible.
Despite news that Health Canada may soon approve the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, Canada's vaccination efforts still have a long way to go. Vicodopia, CBC News, Toronto.
Tighter rules took effect today for travelers flying into Canada. They have to book a hotel for 3 days to await the result of their COVID-19 test. Magda Gebrselassie shows us how frustrating it can be to follow those rules.
Flying into Canada today meant COVID tests and new rules to follow.
The stressful part is that you've been mandated to get a hotel, and that is very stressful in the pocket.
While they wait for test results, travelers have to book a 3-day stay at approved hotels like this one in Montreal. Meals are provided, and the price varies from hotel to hotel.
$436 a night.
It's $180 per night about.
This traveler decided to put up a fight after officials rejected his alternative and slapped him with a fine of $3,000.
I don't think it's just fair. It's fair for me to pay for a hotel while I already pay for an Airbnb.
Others are still struggling to get through on the hotel phone line provided.
Each time we waited 3 hours on hold, and after 3 hours, it just cuts off.
Chris Hederachi spent the last 4 days trying to book a room for his wife, who was recently approved to come to Canada as a permanent resident. She's scheduled to fly from Sri Lanka next week.
My main concern was that she wouldn't be able to come.
He finally got through this afternoon. Others have also complained about the process, but the new rules could help prevent the spread of variants of the virus, says this expert.
If everyone quarantines for 2 weeks after they travel internationally, we will not have new cases of any of these new variants. Now, the variants that are already here, like the UK variant and the South African variant, which appears to be here as well, those will continue to spread if we keep having gatherings.
Health Canada says international travelers are kept on separate hotel floors away from other guests. And those rooms are filling up. Nearly 1,500 travelers are booked to stay in those hotels, and that's just for the final days of this month. Magda Gebre-Selassie, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, more than 500,000 people in the U.S. have now died in this pandemic. Tonight, President Joe Biden marked the moment he asked Americans to resist becoming numb to the sorrow.
We must end the politics and misinformation that's divided families, communities in the country. It has cost too many lives already.
Biden urged people to wear masks, keep their distance, and get the vaccine when they can. He then joined Vice President Kamala Harris for a moment of silence outside the White House to honor all the American lives lost to COVID.
Tomorrow, U.S. President Joe Biden will have his first official one-on-one meeting with any world leader, and it's with Justin Trudeau. David Cochran is in Ottawa with more on the meeting, the discussions that will follow between top members of both cabinets, and crucially, what comes next. So first, David, can you spell out the significance here?
Yeah, Adrian, the significance is simply that Justin Trudeau is the first meeting, and Canadian officials say that reflects Canada's importance as an economic partner and also the broad alignment between the two on big issues like COVID, climate change, and the economy. Biden's making a big effort to rehabilitate the U.S. on the world stage, but U.S. officials also tell us he wants to revitalize that Canada-U.S. relationship after 4 tough years of Donald Trump. And already, Biden has thrown his full support behind Canada's effort to secure the release of the 2 Michaels, Spavor and Kovrig, from Chinese detention. Now, the Michaels will also be discussed tomorrow, but given the sensitivity of that issue, officials aren't elaborating on those talks.
And so, David, should anyone really expect this to lead to some major announcements?
Yeah, there's going to be some specific announcements out of this, notably on making batteries for electric vehicles, which is an issue that ticks the green jobs and cross-border cooperation boxes. But broadly, what you're going to see, Adrian, is a blueprint on how the two countries can work together with specific instructions for the relevant cabinet ministers to advance things. There are some tensions, though. They still need to sort out how Biden's Buy American policy will affect Canada, but there is goodwill to work on that. So you will see progress. You'll see cooperation. What you shouldn't see is the chaos and the anxiety of the Trump years.
All right, David, thank you. I know you'll be watching.
Thank you.
Well, a strong public condemnation today of China's treatment of its Uyghur minority. The House of Commons voted overwhelmingly in favor of an opposition motion calling it genocide. But as Salima Shivji explains, some notable MPs were absent.
Stop the Uyghur genocide!
Pressure outside Parliament for a more forceful stance on what's happening in China's Xinjiang province to the Muslim minority Uyghurs.
My father was taken to the concentration camp, and after that, I didn't know what's happening, like what happened to them. This is textbook style genocide.
Adding to the pressure inside.
The People's Republic of China has
a conservative motion calling for the House to call it a genocide.
The evidence is so overwhelming that we no longer can turn a blind eye.
Mounting evidence like witness testimony, satellite photos, and leaked documents.
We've become sadly used to hearing the phrase
it's complicated to justify not doing what is clearly the right thing.
Only it is complicated for the Liberals, trying to balance support for global human rights with their struggle to manage fraught relations with China. The two Michaels, Kovrig and Spavor, are in their second year of detention, and Beijing is watching, denying a genocide. Another complication for the Prime Minister, he's acknowledged that Canada committed genocide against its Indigenous peoples. Justin Trudeau on Friday was hesitant.
We're still reflecting very carefully on the best path forward for Canada.
Today, notably absent, along with the rest of his cabinet, leaving it to the Foreign Affairs Minister to say,
I abstained on behalf of the Government of Canada.
With every other Liberal MP free to vote in unison.
I vote in favor of this motion.
I vote in favor of the motion.
I vote in favor of the motion.
I declare the motion as amended carried.
The motion is non-binding, meaning nothing really has to happen next. But the Conservative leader wants the Liberal move noticed.
Their coordinated absence speaks volumes.
It speaks also to the only path available to Liberal ministers, simply not voting, with the Conservatives backing the government into a corner on an issue where the Tories see the minority Liberals as vulnerable. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Ottawa.
The UN sent a direct message today to the generals who took over Myanmar 3 weeks ago. Release the prisoners and stop the repression. The military is not backing down, but as Renee Filipponi tells us, neither are the protesters.
Loud but peaceful, and in some of the largest numbers yet. A nationwide show of solidarity as hundreds of thousands come out in cities across Myanmar, all defying a warning from the military that confrontation could lead to bloodshed. We will close all our shops and come here to protest, says this man. The Civil Disobedience Movement, or CDM, has led to today's general strike. Government employees and professionals alike all joined in an attempt to paralyze the country.
It will not be easy, but it is possible. So we have to support the CDM. That is the one and only solution to end the dictatorship.
Among their tactics, railway workers have used their bodies to block trains, disrupting transportation. Strikes have forced some banks to close.
They don't have the capacity.
Kin Zaw-Wen is with the Myanmar think tank. He says soldiers are filling in for staff, but it's not working.
They can't replace the people in the central bank. They can't replace the people in ministries. So they are feeling the pressure.
Over the weekend, a face-off turned deadly in the city of Mandalay. The military used live ammunition to disperse crowds, killing 2 men. And grief poured into the streets of the capital Naypyidaw Sunday for the funeral of a woman who was shot in an earlier protest. All eyes are now on General Min Aung Hlaing, leader of the coup, and how he will deal with the protests and demands to release civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi and hundreds of others.
If he is going to escalate, is he prepared to take the risk? 30 years ago, the generals didn't care. It was a bloodbath in Yangon, you know? This time, I think he has to be a bit more careful.
Careful because these young protesters are showing no signs of backing down. They see this moment as their revolution. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
The Canada Revenue Agency is bracing for a very busy tax season.
We had over 1 million calls to our call centers.
Next on The National, why the pandemic could complicate your tax return.
Seniors who live at home want to know when they'll get the vaccine.
I feel like I'm in the jail. I'm locked up in the jail.
Why they're at risk of more than just COVID-19.
And NASA's new video of the dramatic descent to the red planet.
The navigation has confirmed that the parachute has deployed.
A front row seat to a moment in perseverance. We're back in 2.
Well, today marks the official launch of tax season, the first day Canadians can file their returns. The federal government has already warned this year will be unlike any other. And as Hannah Thibodeau explains, probably a lot more complicated.
Alice Antronikian knows demand for help filling out this year's taxes will be high. She volunteers at a BC senior centre.
Yes, you know, they're edgy. They're edgy.
The seniors are edgy because there are new government benefits that have to be taken into account. many considered taxable income.
So this is going to be a very busy tax season. Usually we have 4 to 6 people who do that. So I'm not yet, I'm not aware of how many more we have this year, but we definitely have to increase that number.
For instance, many seniors in BC collected the provincial recovery benefit. It's a one-time tax-free payment of up to $1,000. Across the country, anyone who got a provincial or a federal COVID-19 benefit and made less than $75,000 won't have to pay interest on any taxes they owe until next year.
You still have to file, but you don't have to pay any amounts owing until April 30th, 2022.
To beef up for general questions about tax season, the Canada Revenue Agency's call centre will add staff and has already extended hours.
We had over 1 million calls to our call centers and versus 80,000 in the prior year.
The CRA is also planning to hire 2,000 additional workers who will be able to help people with their specific account questions, including those about deductions. If you work from home and spent money to do so, you can claim for home office expenses, up to $400.
It's a very simple document. You just put your estimated amount is it's $2 per day of deduction, and you can calculate your days, but it doesn't require any filing of documents.
But the one thing that is back to normal this tax season, the filing date for most people is April 30th. Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Ottawa.
Next, the push to vaccinate more seniors living at home.
How are you feeling today?
I would feel better if I would be able to go out.
Why some families fear they have been overlooked.
And later, a white-knuckle ride to the surface of Mars. The new video of NASA's historic landing. But first.
Legendary electronic music duo Daft Punk has broken up. Known for their ever-present robotic helmets and creative videos, Daft Punk has been a pop culture powerhouse for decades, often teaming up with top stars. And as composers, Daft Punk also won praise for the Tron Legacy soundtrack back in 2010. The announcement came today in a video called Epilogue. Walking across a desert, one robot reaches his limit and seems to silently ask to be set free before going out with a bang. Welcome back. They're over 80 years old and at high risk from COVID, but they haven't gotten their shots yet. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of people living independently in Ontario who want to know when it will be their turn. Joanna Remiliotis looks at why some feel like they've been overlooked.
In his home, in the safety of isolation, the days go on without him. Sam Meister, at nearly 98, there may be a lot more to look back on, but he's not done yet.
I don't have complaint about health-wise, but one thing I have complained that with my age, I have to sit inside in the house and not to move. I am not a free man.
Other than a trip to the dentist, Sam hasn't left his house in nearly a year. His live-in caregiver, Mariselle Evangelista, rarely ventures out either. News that older seniors are next in line for a vaccine is a shot at getting his life back.
How do you feel about the fact that you can't go out?
So I'm listening. If they say I can't go, I'm not going. I'm not going to fight because it's very dangerous if I go out. So I don't go.
Sam, how are you?
At his age, Sam says, there's not a lot of time left to wait.
How are you feeling today?
I would feel better if I would be able to go out.
Dr. Samir Sinha is Sam's doctor. Sinha is the head of geriatrics at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto.
You're my oldest patient who's at highest risk of dying from COVID-19.
Yeah.
So that's why I think you need to get the vaccine sooner rather than later.
He's been advocating for seniors like Sam, who live at home, to be prioritized for vaccination. And it's finally paying off.
I'm trying my best, Sam. I'm trying to fight for people like you.
Thank you, thank you. I feel like I'm in the jail. I'm locked up in the jail.
It frustrates me enormously because I have older patients, for example, who are at high risk, and that maddens me because they're frustrated, they've been doing their part, but they're at high risk, and I've lost patients to COVID. It's not fun knowing that there were things that we could have done to prevent these deaths from happening, and that sickens me the most.
Sinha says seniors have paid the highest price in this pandemic. Delays in vaccinating the elderly in care have already resulted in even more infections and deaths in long-term care homes. And there is still the vast majority of Ontario's seniors who live in the community, who are the most vulnerable and who he's had to keep fighting for.
Who's actually driving the hospital capacity from COVID? It's older people who get infected, older people end up in hospitals, older people end up in ICUs, older people end up dying.
Yet he says most older people are still uncertain about when they will be vaccinated.
There are 3.5 million seniors across Ontario, and right now they've represented 96% of our deaths. So when you actually realize that we are missing these opportunities to get those who are most at risk vaccinated as soon as possible, that's what concerns me.
Under that pressure, Ontario's vaccine rollout was recently revised. Seniors over 80 who live independently have been bumped up. About 500,000 elderly people are now next in line for a shot. Ontario hopes those immunizations will begin in mid-March if vaccine supply is reliable, and says it will take weeks to get to all of them.
Hi, how are you? Good morning.
At a certain age, every day matters. Olga Libak is 90 years old and lives alone. A personal support worker comes in a few times a week, mostly to help her bathe. It's not always the same person, and not all workers have been vaccinated either. Olga's son Jaime worries about the exposure, and he's worried too about the mental damage that has already been done.
So Olga, how are you feeling these days?
Panic.
Why do you feel panic?
For me, not so much, but for my children, my great-grandchildren. I am afraid.
Cambian ideas y se ponen al día también de lo que está pasando, ¿no?
Jaime is the only one from their large extended family who is able to come by to check in. Olga misses her other children and grandchildren.
Sad because with my children only I have to talk with my phone, you know? But no.
No physical.
Yeah.
When you hear your mom say that, how do you feel?
Well, it hurts. It hurts, and again, makes me feel that there is something wrong out there, because we're not able to take care of our seniors. The worry, the fear, the anxiety shortens the life of the person, right? And she spoke about it. She said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to see my children or grandchildren again.
Adding to the worry, Jaime is 66, but younger seniors like himself will only get vaccinated after essential workers do. It could be months. As her main caregiver, he's afraid of what will happen to his mom if he gets COVID.
Right now, I'm very concerned. As a son of a senior, as a senior myself, I think we need to be very clear that the seniors in the community need to be the priority now, because seniors and little disease have been taken care of. Frontline workers have been taken care of. Now the priority should be on the seniors in the community, and I'm not hearing that from the government.
The emotional toll is draining. So are the other quiet sacrifices.
Hi, Bob.
Hello.
Sir, it's Bobby.
Hi.
Wait.
How are you?
At Sam's house, dinner usually involves virtual guests.
Hi, Mom. How are you? Hi, Mr. Meister. How are you?
Today, it's Sam's son and Marizel's family too. Marizel hasn't lived in her own home for a year to keep Sam safe.
Okay, Mom. Enjoy your supper. I love you. Bye.
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 I told them that's not permanent. We're gonna be together again. And then I can see them and hug them and kiss them. It's very hard, very, very, very hard. Sometimes I cry. It's not easy.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
As for Sam, he may be next in line for a vaccine, but he's anxious to know when.
I'll be able to come out from the front of the door. I would love to get it.
Happy 98th birthday. We love you.
Today is his 98th birthday, and this is as close as he can get to his family.
We love you.
We'll see you next weekend, okay?
The visit is a reminder, too, that time only gets more precious by the day. Joanna Rumeliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
Are you a senior living in the community? Do you have questions about when you will get the vaccine? We want to hear from you. Email us at covid@cbc.ca. We will answer your questions here on The National tomorrow night.
Now, when it comes to rolling vaccines out to all seniors over 80 in Ontario, we noted earlier how there's a plan, but it involves 34 separate plans, one for each regional public health authority in the province, a very decentralized approach. So let's try to understand what that means exactly with the help of Dr. Isaac Bogosh, who is a member of Ontario's Vaccine Distribution Task Force, which means, Dr. Bogosh, you don't make policy, but your expertise certainly informs how the government then decides these kinds of things. So 34 regional health units coming up with their own plans. Why was that the best way to approach this?
Yeah, well, for starters, there is a common playbook. There is a common set of rules that all the 34 public health units are playing by. But of course, public health is local, and they really have to find the best ways to vaccinate those that they represent. So for example, a vaccination program for Kenora might look a little bit different than a vaccination program for Peel. Different populations, different geographies, and of course, the local public health knowledge is invaluable. Still, there's going to be more similarities than differences. Everyone's going to have mass vaccine sites. Everyone's going to have community centers that are vaccinating. People are going to have primary care and pharmacies vaccinating. Most units are going to have mobile trucks to help with underserviced and homeless populations. So there's going to be more similarities than differences.
But there is a disadvantage, though, right? Like this is sort of the definition of a patchwork approach. So if seniors in different regions get different access or go to different places for information, does that risk getting complicated?
Well, there actually is a common source of information, and that is the provincial website. And the provincial website for vaccination will have all the information on how people can sign up when the time comes and point them in the right direction. So by pointing people to the exact same source for information, people will have a good understanding of how they can get vaccinated, when they can get vaccinated, and how they'll be prioritized.
Okay, we'll be watching. Always good to have you on the program. Dr. Bogosh, thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
And when we come back, a near decade-long journey to justice.
She should be remembered as a kind and loving, compassionate mother.
The family of Cindy Gladue shares the memories and the pain. An exclusive interview next.
This is Cindy Gladue. In 2011, she was found dead in an Edmonton hotel, but her killer was convicted of manslaughter just 3 days ago. Over the course of nearly a decade, he was tried, acquitted, then tried again. But for many, it often felt as if Gladue herself was the one being judged. As the family was waiting for that verdict, they spoke exclusively to CBC News about Cindy and about what justice for her family finally allows them to do. Jorge Barrera brings us that story.
Warmth of family. Near the end of a 10-year journey, their thoughts surround one loved woman lost, Cindy Gladue. Cindy's mother, Donna McLeod, in the glow of affection from nieces, granddaughters, great-grandchildren, quietly shares the weight of Cindy's absence.
Never dreamed about dead girl. Never. Ever since she passed away. And I've had elders tell me that when this is all over, I'll probably start dreaming about her.
On this night, the jury began deliberating on the fate of the man charged with taking Cindy's life on June 22nd, 2011. For the past decade, they've been waiting for justice.
Pretty tough, sitting in court.
Prairie Dowie is Cindy's younger cousin.
She just had a, I guess, a zen for life. She always wanted the best for us kids. And growing up, I looked at her as a role model. She always took care of us, loved us.
Cindy, the oldest of four, grew up with her family in Northeast Edmonton. Nicknamed Shandy by her grandmother, she loved cuddling with her daughter, watching cooking shows, making breakfast for her mother. To her family, Cindy was spark, she was joy.
We'd get up and we'd start dancing, and she'd crank the music, and she'd be like, okay, let's get up. And we would do the train, and we'd start doing the locomotion with one another.
She passed that spark to her children, 3 daughters, Cheyenne, Brianna, and Brandy.
Her kids just loved her. I saw the joy of her kids, how they made her so happy.
Her daughters now have children of their own, grandchildren Cindy could never meet.
It was devastating. It was really hard. It was really hard to learn that she died in such a violent way.
The devastation continued for the family when the trial began. The brutality of her death dissected, repeated. In court, constant references she was a sex worker, images of her body, the bloody bathtub.
They were saying some awful things about her, and then they showed some pictures. They showed some pictures on the screen, and they showed that they turned the screen to our family, and I just remember going like that, and I couldn't come back.
The first trial reduced Cindy to a stereotype. The Crown and defense referred to her time and time again as the Native Lady. In 2015, the man accused of killing her was acquitted. The decision sparked outrage, protests across major Canadian cities.
We're like, how does this happen? It was such an ugly feeling. I remember the pain that sat there with us. It was so unfair.
The case was appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, which ordered a new manslaughter trial in 2019.
She was objectified and dehumanized, called a specimen.
Cindy has a lot of supporters. We have a lot of people that know that the justice system failed us.
For the family, 10 years of headlines and courtroom arguments reduced and obscured the fullness of Cindy's life, her humanity. The family is now fighting to reclaim.
She should be remembered as a kind and loving, compassionate mother. She had a big spirit, and she was a happy girl, and I think that's what she needed to be remembered as, somebody that was loved.
Early Friday morning, Cindy's family makes that familiar walk back to the courthouse to await the verdict. 9 hours later, bittersweet relief. Bradley Barton, guilty of manslaughter.
Feeling happy. It's all over, and I'm thankful. She was a daughter, she was a mom, a grandmother. Now it's over. Everybody's happy now.
This is only the beginning of the end for the family, but maybe now, 10 years later, Donna can dream of Cindy again. Jorge Barrera, CBC News, Edmonton.
Cindy Gladou's family and friends will be able to bring their memories of her into court during her killer's sentencing hearing. The date for that is expected to be set this week.
Just ahead, COVID's burden on Italian women. The pandemic has thrown a spotlight on their unequal treatment in the workforce. Who is calling for change, and what is standing in the way?
I'm Jamie Poisson, and tomorrow on CBC's Daily News podcast, Front Burner, as Canada considers ways to make big tech pay for news, lessons from Australia's fight with Facebook. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
1 year ago, this little town in northern Italy went quiet after reporting the country's first case of COVID-19. Codogno was put under lockdown. Coronavirus was on its way to ravage the country. Now, a year later, so much has changed. So much has been illuminated. Businesses have shuttered and existing economic inequalities have been exacerbated. Megan Williams is there and shows the particular impact women have felt.
Veneto, a region renowned for its hard-working people and can-do spirit, and for the hundreds of small businesses that help form the economic backbone of Italy. Like this one-woman green economy startup in Vicenza that shreds discarded clothing, compressing it into everything from jewelry boxes to furniture, all recyclable.
Fashion industry is one of the most polluted industry.
Giulia De Rossi left a coveted full-time job with benefits to launch the kind of company she says Italy should be investing in.
It was a little bit shocking for my family.
When COVID hit, dealing with the infamous bureaucracy here wasn't the only challenge. The public funds she'd secured to start her business redirected to fighting COVID. With childcare costs high, she thought of giving up when her son was born, before her mother-in-law stepped in to help out.
Italy has one of the lowest percentages of women in the workplace in all of Europe. And with the advent of COVID, the small gains that had been made here were lost. Out of all the jobs lost in Italy during the pandemic, 70% were female.
Freelance journalist Valentina Saini writes about gender issues in Italian politics. She says employment for women in Italy is precarious.
Women tend to be hired, especially in jobs that do not require higher levels of education, with temporary contracts.
Italy's new government has promised to address the country's soaring youth unemployment and invest in women. But many here are skeptical. Like Vice President of the Northern Emilia-Romagna region, Ellie Schlein, one of Italy's few politicians under 40.
It's a sign of a patriarchal society that has not yet understood that you can only write better policies for the complex problems of society if you don't have an eye closed, the eye of women.
And while COVID has brought an urgency to Italy's long-standing gender and youth problem, it's also prompted pointed questions to Italy's leaders from a generation and gender that's tired of waiting.
Why haven't you done this before? I mean, we had COVID and something has changed, but we really need to have COVID to change something.
Megan Williams, CBC News, Vicenza, Italy.
Well, next on The National, a stunning front row look at the red planet. The incredible new video capturing the moment Perseverance touched down on Mars. Our moment is next.
Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars.
Well, there it is, the exact moment NASA's Mars Perseverance safely landed on the surface of the red planet. It happened last Thursday, but today NASA released stunning new video of the rover's landing. The fascinating descent was captured by high-definition video cameras strapped to the spacecraft, and tonight, that incredible moment of Perseverance landing is our moment.
This was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. We got video. High definition video that we've never seen before. And it looks like animation, but this is real. And that's something that blew me away. This is like science fiction has become science reality. Literally, I had tears in my eyes when I was watching this.
Navigation has confirmed that the parachute has deployed and we are seeing significant deceleration.
This is like watching The Martian, like a movie of what is actually going on, except it's not a movie. This is actually real. And this is an incredible time to be alive, really, when it comes to science. You know, it's nice to have something good to look at and something to look forward to.
We're getting signals from MRO. Tango Delta.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the signs of past life.
So it is nice to have something nice to look at.
No doubt.
And to that end, have a look at the website, cbc.ca, because when you look at the photographs of the Perseverance, there's a little treat in there. There are odd Easter eggs. So one is a bumper sticker that, like you see on cars, that shows the whole Rover family. Don't make me name them all, but
right.
they're all there.
Oh, it's amazing. And I mean, the best part is that there's so much more to come, right? Pictures, videos that'll all trickle out over the coming days and weeks, I'm sure. That's The National for this February 22nd. Have a great night.
Good night.